A forecast by Gartner predicts that low-code platforms by 2024 will account for 65% of the IT and software development market. In this video, I want to discuss low-code, no-code. And you may have heard of low-code, no-code as some kind of buzzwords, or maybe you don't even know what it really means. So let's just start with the basics here. What is low-code, no-code? So low coding is going to be very little coding, and no coding is going to be no coding. And when we talk about low code, no code, we're talking about building and developing things like apps and websites. And so these are basically platforms, like if you imagine a drag and drop website builder, that would be a no-code platform where you could build a website without code, just drag and drop elements and deploy your website. You know, no-code and low-code are very similar, and you might look at some of these no-code platforms and be like, well, they allow you to code in it. But the concept of no-code is that it allows people with no coding experience whatsoever to actually build and develop websites and applications. So they don't need to use that coding editor necessarily, whereas a low-code platform would require some coding, whether it's minimal coding or whatever. It would require some experience and understanding to actually be able to build and develop. So the low-code, no-code movement is basically building and developing with either very little code minimally required to build or develop, or no coding at all for you to build and develop websites and apps. So why would we even consider using no-code, low-code? If you can get the exact same end result that you can get from setting up an entire tech stack, maintaining it, getting all of the libraries, coding every single thing from scratch, if you can get that exact same result just using a drag and drop builder with AI features, it's going to be a lot less work. It's going to be much faster. It's going to be a lot cleaner and easier to maintain over time. And it's potentially going to cost a lot less money. So here are some charts with the forecasted growth of the low code, no code market. You can see it's growing extremely fast. And then we have to take into account that only 0.5% of the world's population knows how to code. So think about that. 99.5% of the world's population don't know how to code, but then they will be able to become developers and build using no-code platforms. So if low-code, no-code is actually becoming popular that quickly, then why aren't that many people talking about it? And there's a few reasons for that. One of them being the negative connotation that this would replace a lot of web developer, full stack developer, app developer positions. And another being that these platforms have been being developed and worked on for years now. And if you've ever used one of these platforms and done the drag and drop websites, you might not have been that impressed and realize you couldn't have full control over the development of your application or website. But as developers, we do need to keep an eye on these emerging technologies and make sure we're prepared for any major shifts in the tech industry. So I personally am a believer that low code, no code is not just hype, right? These platforms are popping up all over the place and they're getting really good. And if we take a look at the evolution of programming, the history of it, we could see that computers started with a bunch of switches that people manually switched. And then there was binary with zeros and ones, and then assembly code was made out of that. So people coded in assembly, but it was super difficult to get things done. It was thousands and thousands of lines of assembly. So then what did we do? We made C, a more simple way to code that is built on assembly language. So then we have the C programming language. And then C is kind of hard to code in, right? Coding in C is pretty hard. We use it for things like robotics and self-driving cars and lower level system stuff. But then we were like, okay, let's make this even easier. So we made Python, which is practically English, and that is built on top of C. So you could see that over the years, it's just getting easier and easier and easier to build and develop what we want to make. And so if you follow this trend, just like in web development, when at first we were using PHP and HTML, CSS, plain JavaScript, and then we shifted over to Node.js server sides and JavaScript frameworks like React.js, and now we're getting TypeScript, which has type checks for JavaScript. The things that we're using to build as developers, they're just getting easier and easier for us to use, which is good. And it's just all of technology, right? As tools get better, it will get easier for us to build things. It's as simple as that. So it's pretty obvious to me that eventually there will be platforms good enough for us to be able to build whatever we want to build with either very minimal amount of code or no code at all. If we were to look at Wix Studio, for example, which is a newer no-code platform, it is becoming very powerful. If you've ever used Wix to build a website before, you might have thought, oh, I don't have that much control. It's a bunch of template websites. But now Wix Studio just came out and it's pretty insane. They've got crazy cool no-code animations you need to install CSS libraries and really work on to get. They use AI for complex responsive behaviors in the site. They have a coding editor section that can break down the site into components that you can edit in Visual Studio Code as you hook it up to Wix Studio. And then they have a whole marketplace for these components. So people can make different components of a website, put them up on a marketplace, and people can pull those and put them directly into their websites. And they have a built-in AI code assistant where you explain the code that you want for your website and it just generates it for you automatically. So while before you might have thought, oh, well, I want to code instead because I want full control over what I'm building. Wix Studio still gives you that full control, and it gives you all of these powerful AI tools and cutting edge design things that makes it just a lot easier of a development process, in my opinion. And if you think this is an all hype thing, you could look up the dozens of companies and startups that are starting their company from scratch, building software companies using no-code platforms. What's not being as acknowledged nowadays is how important low-code and no-code technologies are, and how many companies are starting to incorporate them into their workflows, and how powerful these platforms are becoming for building and deploying applications. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say this is a solution for every software project that you want to work on, right? That would be crazy. There's so many things you can't build using low code, no code still. But there are a ton of things that are being coded right now that people are spending a lot of time coding that can be done a lot more quickly and probably function or look better using no-code, low-code platforms like portfolio websites or blogs or e-commerce websites, simple applications. It is definitely worth it now to check these platforms out when you're planning on building something and considering whether this might be the route you want to go instead of setting up a whole project from scratch. So let's face it, we don't need fancy technologies and a fancy tech stack and a bunch of engineers to build a lot of things that are being built nowadays. When we build now, we should sit down and consider whether we can use a simple solution like a no-code, low-code platform to build and achieve the same results that we're trying to achieve through coding. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about in this video. I know it can be easy to blow these platforms off like, oh, this is just hype. I've been hearing about these forever. None of them are good enough. None of them are giving you control. But I wanted to talk about how some of the newer ones, like Wix Studio, for example, they are getting really powerful, and you definitely should check some of the new technologies, especially now that AI is getting more advanced. These platforms are incorporating AI and making this developer experience for a lot of projects very easy. And these platforms have good infrastructure, and they're integrating and hooking up to a lot of different softwares and APIs out there so that you can build exactly what you want to build without coding. I'll leave some links in the description to the forecasts I mentioned, as well as Wix Studio if you want to check that out. I think that's a really cool one right now. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.